The moment Officer Daniel Reeves slammed his flashlight against the black Harley-Davidson, he thought he was stopping just another biker. But less than 10 minutes later, military Humvees would lock down the entire street. Rain poured steadily over Highway 9 outside downtown Atlanta, turning the asphalt into a mirror of red and blue police lights flashing through the darkness. Traffic had slowed to a crawl. Drivers rolled down their windows, phones already rising into the air as two patrol cruisers boxed in a lone motorcycle near the shoulder. Naomi Carter sat motionless on the bike, her black helmet still on, rainwater dripping from the edge of her visor onto the leather jacket stretched across her shoulders. The Harley engine rumbled low beneath her like a restrained animal waiting for permission to breathe again. Officer Reeves stepped out of his cruiser with the swagger of a man who had worn a badge too long, without anyone questioning him. Tall, broad, white, his jaw tightened as he approached the motorcycle while the second officer stayed behind near the cruiser door, already smirking as he watched the scene unfold. License and registration, Reeves barked over the rain. Naomi slowly removed one gloved hand from the handlebars and reached inside her jacket pocket. Calm, controlled, too calm for Reeves's liking. Her silence irritated him more than excuses ever could. He shined the flashlight directly into her face the moment her visor lifted. "You know why I pulled you over?" he asked. Naomi looked at him quietly, dark eyes steady beneath the storm. "No, officer." Reeves glanced at the Harley again. Matte black paint, custom military saddlebags, expensive tires. Not the kind of machine he expected a black woman riding alone after midnight to own. His expression hardened. "This bike yours?" Naomi answered without hesitation. "Yes." Reeves gave a dry laugh and looked back at the younger officer near the cruiser. "That's interesting." The younger cop chuckled under his breath, while several drivers nearby continued recording through rain-streaked windows. Naomi noticed every phone camera pointed toward her. She noticed the whispers too. Another stop. Another. Scene. Another woman forced to prove she belonged somewhere. But unlike the tension spreading through the crowd, Naomi's breathing never changed. Slow. Even. Disciplined. Reeves circled the motorcycle like he was inspecting stolen property. "Step off the bike." Naomi complied carefully, boots touching the wet pavement with quiet precision. Reeves immediately grabbed her wrist and guided her toward the hood of the cruiser more aggressively than necessary. "You carrying anything illegal tonight?" "No, officer." "Weapons?" "No." Reeves stared at her another second, almost disappointed by her composure. Most people panicked by now. Most people argued. Naomi didn't either. Rain hammered the metal roof of the patrol car, while the younger officer suddenly pointed toward the motorcycle saddlebag. "Hey Reeves, this thing's locked." Reeves walked over and yanked at the black metal case attached beside the rear wheel. No visible latch. No standard keyhole. Just a small biometric scanner glowing faintly blue beneath the rainwater. Reeves frowned. "What the hell is this?" Naomi's eyes shifted toward the case for the first time since the stop began. Not fear. Not panic. Something colder. More calculating. Reeves caught the look immediately. "Open it." Naomi stayed silent. The younger officer stepped closer. "You deaf?" Reeves slammed his palm against the locked case. "I said open it." Naomi finally spoke, her voice low beneath the storm. "Officer, you really don't want to touch that." For a brief second, even the rain seemed quieter. Reeves stared at her, then laughed loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "Oh, I'm supposed to be scared now." Naomi didn't answer. Instead, she slowly turned her head toward the distant overpass above Highway 9. And somewhere far away, barely audible beneath the thunder and sirens, came the deep vibration of heavy military engines moving fast through the city. Officer Daniel Reeves narrowed his eyes toward the overpass as the distant rumble continued vibrating through the rain-soaked highway. For a moment he said nothing. Then he laughed again, louder this time, shaking his head while water dripped from the brim of his patrol cap. "You hear that?" He called toward the younger officer. "Now she thinks she is in some action movie." The younger cop grinned nervously, but his eyes kept drifting toward the dark skyline beyond the bridge. Something about the sound felt wrong. Too heavy. Too organized. Naomi Carter remained standing beside the patrol cruiser with rain sliding down her black leather jacket. Her hands stayed visible. Calm. Relaxed. Almost patient. It was that patience that bothered Reeves more than anything else. Most people became emotional once a traffic stop turned public. Most people raised their voices when strangers started recording. Naomi simply watched the road ahead like she already knew what was coming. Cars had nearly stopped completely now. Drivers leaned halfway out their windows despite the storm, cell phones glowing across the highway like tiny floating lanterns. Social media live streams had already started spreading. Another black biker detained by police on a rainy Atlanta highway. Another late-night confrontation. Another crowd waiting to see whether things would escalate. Reeves walked back toward the locked metal case attached to the Harley-Davidson. The blue biometric light still blinked softly beneath the rainwater. He tapped it again with his flashlight. Federal equipment? He mocked. What is this supposed to be? Naomi finally looked directly at him again. You should stop touching it. Reeves smirked. Or what? Naomi did not answer immediately. Thunder rolled across the city skyline, while red and blue lights reflected across the slick pavement around them. Somewhere overhead, a news helicopter slowly rotated through the clouds, its spotlight occasionally sweeping across the traffic below. Reeves noticed the helicopter and scoffed under his breath. Perfect, he muttered. Now the whole city gets to watch. The younger officer stepped closer to Naomi. Look, if this turns out to be stolen military gear, you are in serious trouble. Naomi tilted her head slightly. You still think this stop is about me? That sentence landed differently. Even the younger cop hesitated after hearing it. Reeves immediately stepped forward again, his voice sharpening. Do not play games. With me. Naomi's eyes shifted briefly toward the highway entrance ramp less than half a mile away. The vibration in the ground had become stronger now. Not imagined. Not distant anymore. Several people in the stopped traffic noticed it too. Heads turned. Phones lifted higher. One man rolled down his truck window and shouted, Yo, what is that? Then the first pair of headlights appeared through the rain. Large. Wide. Moving fast. Reeves squinted into the darkness as the vehicles pushed onto Highway 9 in tight formation. Matte green military Humvees. One after another. Water sprayed violently beneath their tires as they accelerated toward the traffic stop with controlled precision. The younger officer's smile disappeared instantly. Reeves, he whispered. But the convoy did not slow down. 6 Humvees tore through the rain in perfect alignment, while black SUVs followed behind them with flashing federal lights hidden behind dark grills. Drivers across the highway immediately pulled out phones. Some stepped out of their vehicles entirely despite the storm. Reeves felt something cold settle into his stomach for the first time that night. Naomi finally spoke again, her voice almost drowned beneath the approaching engines. I gave you a chance to walk away, officer. The lead Humvee suddenly swerved sideways across the highway less than 30 yards from the patrol cars, blocking every lane with military precision. Doors opened instantly. Armed personnel in dark tactical rain gear stepped onto the pavement, while the spinning lights from the police cruisers reflected across patches on their sleeves. Reeves could not fully make out through the rain. Then one of the black SUVs stopped directly beside Naomi's motorcycle. The rear passenger door opened slowly, and the moment the tall gray-haired man stepped out into the storm, every expression on Naomi's face disappeared completely, replaced by something far more dangerous than anger. Recognition. The rain kept crashing against the highway as silence spread across the entire scene in a way Officer Daniel Reeves had never experienced before. Just minutes ago, he had controlled everything. The flashing patrol lights, the crowd, the stop, the narrative. But now every pair of eyes on Highway 9 had shifted away from him and toward the convoy that had swallowed the road whole. The tall gray-haired man standing beside the black SUV adjusted the collar of his dark coat, while military personnel moved around him with sharp discipline. Nobody shouted. Nobody panicked. That calm professionalism somehow made the situation feel even heavier. Reeves instinctively stepped backward as one of the tactical officers approached him. Hands visible. Officer, the man said firmly. Reeves immediately raised his voice. Excuse me? This is an active police stop. Who exactly are you people? The tactical officer ignored the question completely and turned toward Naomi instead. Commander Carter, are you secure? Several people in the stopped traffic gasped loud enough to be heard even through the storm. Commander. Reeves blinked hard, as if his brain refused to process the word. Naomi slowly removed her helmet, rainwater sliding down the dark curls pressed against her face. For the first time all night, She looked tired. Not afraid. Tired. The older man from the SUV walked toward her carefully, his polished shoes splashing through shallow puddles on the highway. "Naomi," he said quietly, "are you hurt?" "No, sir." His jaw tightened as his eyes moved briefly toward Reeves and the younger officer beside the patrol car. "Then we are already behind schedule." Reeves finally found his voice again. "Listen, nobody here knows what is going on, but she refused to cooperate in that locked case." "Stop talking," the older man interrupted coldly. Reeves froze mid-sentence. The man reached inside his coat and displayed a federal identification badge so quickly the surrounding cameras barely caught it. But Reeves saw enough. Department of Defense. High-level clearance. His stomach dropped immediately. Around them, phones continued recording from every direction. Livestream comments exploded. Viewers across Atlanta watched military personnel securing an ordinary traffic stop like it was a national emergency. Naomi stepped toward the Harley-Davidson while one of the tactical agents carefully removed the locked metal case from the saddlebag. The blue biometric scanner flashed once beneath the rain before recognizing Naomi's fingerprint. Reeves stared at the case opening slowly. Inside was not money, not weapons, not drugs, just a stack of sealed files inside a black thermal container stamped with federal markings he did not recognize. The older man looked directly at Reeves for the first time. "Do you have any idea what you interrupted tonight?" Reeves swallowed hard. "Sir, she matched suspicious behavior and suspicious," the man repeated quietly. "A black woman riding an expensive motorcycle after midnight looked suspicious to you." Reeves opened his mouth, but no words came out. The younger officer beside him looked down at the pavement, visibly shaken now. Naomi remained silent while tactical personnel loaded the container into the SUV. She never once looked triumphant. That somehow made the moment worse for Reeves. There was no anger in her eyes. No revenge. Just disappointment. Deep, exhausted disappointment. The older man finally extended his hand toward Naomi. "Colonel Marcus Hayes." Several nearby drivers repeated the name aloud after hearing it. Some already recognized it from television interviews and military briefings shown during national emergencies. Reeves felt the blood drain from his face. Colonel Hayes turned back toward him one last time. "Commander Carter was transporting classified defense intelligence tied to an active interstate operation. Your department received federal notice 4 hours ago ordering local units not to interfere with designated vehicles on this corridor tonight." Reeves stared at him in shock. "We never got any notice." Colonel Hayes stepped closer beneath the flashing lights and rain. "Then somebody in your department made sure you did not." The highway suddenly felt colder than before. Because in that moment Reeves realized something far worse than a bad traffic stop had just begun. The storm above Atlanta seemed to grow louder as flashing lights painted the rain-soaked highway in waves of red, blue, and military white. Officer Daniel Reeves stood frozen beside his patrol cruiser while traffic cameras, live streams, and dozens of cell phones captured every second of the unraveling scene. The confidence he carried earlier that night had completely disappeared. In its place was confusion mixed with something deeper. Fear. Around him, tactical personnel moved with silent coordination, checking vehicles, communicating through earpieces, and securing the convoy route as if they had rehearsed the operation 100 times before. Nobody treated this like a routine stop anymore. Because it was not. Naomi Carter leaned quietly against her Harley-Davidson while one of the agents handed her a dry black tactical jacket from the SUV. She slipped it on without speaking. Her movements were smooth and practiced, the kind built from years of discipline rather than emotion. Reeves noticed something then that made his stomach tighten even more. Every person in that convoy treated Naomi with respect. Not forced respect. Not fear. Genuine trust. The kind usually reserved for someone whose decisions carried weight. Colonel Marcus Hayes stood near the center lane watching traffic officers scramble farther down the highway. The younger patrol officer beside Reeves finally whispered what both of them were thinking. "Daniel, what if somebody buried that federal notice on purpose?" Reeves immediately looked toward him. "What are you talking about?" The younger officer lowered his voice even more. "Think about it. Why would military intelligence be transporting classified material through city jurisdiction without direct protection unless they were trying to avoid attention?" Reeves opened his mouth to answer, but stopped. Because now he was thinking about it too. The route. The missing notice. The timing. None of this felt random anymore. Colonel Hayes suddenly turned toward Naomi. We need to move. The delay already compromised the transfer window. Naomi nodded once. Do we know who leaked the corridor? Hayes's expression darkened slightly. Not yet. Reeves heard every word. Leak. Corridor. Transfer window. The situation was becoming bigger by the minute, and for the first time in years, he realized he had absolutely no control over it. A loud buzz suddenly erupted from several police radios at once. Officers across the highway looked down in confusion as dispatch channels exploded with overlapping voices. All units stand by. Federal override active. Repeat, federal override active. One state trooper near the overpass stepped back from his cruiser after hearing the transmission, visibly startled. Then came another message that made the entire scene go still. Atlanta Police Internal Affairs requested immediately at Highway 9 checkpoint. Reeves felt his chest tighten instantly. Internal Affairs. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Right now? The younger officer slowly looked toward him. Neither man spoke. Naomi watched the exchange quietly from beside the motorcycle. Rain rolled down the side of her face, while the helicopter overhead continued circling like a spotlight over a collapsing stage. One of the tactical agents approached Colonel Hayes holding a tablet covered in rain droplets. Sir, social media spread is escalating fast. More than 3 million live viewers across platforms. Hayes barely reacted. Lock down civilian footage involving the container. Leave everything else. Reeves stared at him in disbelief. You can just erase footage? Hayes looked at him coldly. Officer, tonight stopped being your jurisdiction the moment you put your hands on federal intelligence assets. The words hit harder than Reeves expected. Not because of the authority behind them. Because deep down he knew exactly why he had stopped Naomi in the first place. Not reckless driving. Not a traffic violation. A black woman alone on an expensive motorcycle after midnight had simply looked suspicious to him. And now the entire country was watching the consequences unfold in real time. Naomi stepped toward him slowly for the first time since the convoy arrived. Her voice stayed calm, almost painfully calm. You never saw me as dangerous, Officer Reeves. He looked at her silently. Naomi continued softly. You saw me as someone who did not belong. Reeves could not answer. Because standing there beneath the rain and flashing lights, with military vehicles surrounding the highway and federal agents moving around them, he realized she had been right from the very beginning. The most dangerous thing on Highway 9 that night had never been Naomi Carter. It was the assumptions made the moment she took off her helmet. The rain finally began to ease, but the tension on Highway 9 only grew heavier. Red and blue reflections stretched across the wet pavement, while helicopters continued circling overhead, broadcasting the scene live across half the country. Officer Daniel Reeves stood beside his patrol cruiser feeling smaller with every passing minute. Federal agents moved around him like he was invisible now. His badge no longer carried authority here. It barely carried weight. Naomi Carter walked slowly toward the black SUV while Colonel Marcus Hayes remained beside the convoy studying incoming updates on a secure tablet. Every few seconds another tactical vehicle arrived from the city, sealing off additional exits around the highway. Drivers trapped in traffic had stopped complaining entirely. Most of them were too busy recording. Social media feeds exploded with speculation. Some viewers thought Naomi was military intelligence. Others believed the city was under attack. Nobody knew the truth yet, and that uncertainty was feeding the storm online even faster than the rain had fed the storm above Atlanta. Reeves suddenly heard another patrol unit arrive behind the barricade. 2 internal affairs investigators stepped out wearing dark jackets with silver lettering across their backs. The younger officer beside Reeves immediately lowered his head. Reeves tried to steady his breathing as the investigators approached. Officer Daniel Reeves? One of them asked. Yes. You are instructed to remain on scene pending federal review. Reeves looked toward Colonel Hayes. Federal review for what exactly? The investigator gave him a long stare before answering. Potential interference with classified operations. The words landed like concrete. Around them, several officers exchanged nervous glances. Nobody wanted to be standing near Reeves anymore. Not now. Naomi remained near the SUV while a tactical medic briefly checked her wrist where Reeves had grabbed her earlier. She calmly pulled away afterward. I am fine, she said quietly. The medic nodded and Stepped back immediately. Reeves noticed that too. Nobody argued with her. Nobody spoke over her. She carried authority without raising her voice once. Colonel Hayes finally motioned Naomi toward the rear of the SUV where the sealed thermal container had been secured inside reinforced brackets. "We confirmed the leak originated locally," he told her. Naomi's expression hardened slightly. "Police department?" "Not directly." Hayes lowered his voice further. "Somebody inside city communications rerouted the federal advisory before it reached patrol channels." Naomi stared toward the skyline for several seconds. "So tonight was never random?" "No," Hayes answered. "You were meant to be delayed." Reeves overheard enough of the conversation to feel his pulse rise again. Delayed. Not stopped. Delayed. Which meant whatever Naomi had been transporting mattered enough for someone to interfere before it reached its destination. The younger officer beside Reeves suddenly whispered, "Daniel, if this operation was compromised because of us." Reeves snapped back defensively. "Because of us. I made a traffic stop." But even as he said it, the words sounded weak. Hollow. He remembered Naomi standing beside the Harley in the rain while he questioned whether the bike even belonged to her. He remembered the smirks, the assumptions, the cameras recording everything. Deep down he knew the truth. He had not treated her like a potential federal asset. He had treated her like she was suspicious before she ever spoke a word. A nearby television reporter suddenly appeared near the barricade shouting questions toward the convoy. "Colonel Hayes, is this connected to a federal security threat? Was classified intelligence exposed tonight?" Tactical agents immediately pushed the media back without aggression, but with absolute control. The highway had transformed into something surreal. Police cruisers, Humvees, news helicopters, federal command vehicles. All because one officer decided a black woman on a motorcycle looked out of place. Naomi slowly walked back toward her Harley-Davidson and rested one hand against the rain-covered seat. Her eyes moved across the trapped traffic, the flashing lights, and the dozens of strangers still filming her from their windows. Then she looked directly at Reeves one more time. "You know the saddest part?" she asked quietly. Reeves could not answer. Naomi's voice remained calm. "If I looked different tonight, none of this would have happened." And standing there beneath the fading storm, with the entire city watching around him, Daniel Reeves realized there was nothing he could say to prove she was wrong. By 2:30 in the morning, Highway 9 no longer looked like part of Atlanta. It looked like the center of a federal operation unfolding in real time beneath helicopters and floodlights. Rainwater still glistened across the pavement while lines of trapped vehicles stretched for nearly a mile behind the barricades. People sat inside their cars staring through fogged windows at military Humvees parked beside local police cruisers, like two completely different worlds had collided in the middle of the highway. Naomi Carter stood near the black SUV with her arms folded tightly across her tactical jacket, while Colonel Marcus Hayes spoke quietly with several federal officials beside a mobile command unit. Every few minutes another secure call came through. More names, more updates, more pieces of a larger puzzle revealing itself. Officer Daniel Reeves remained near the patrol car under the watch of internal affairs investigators. His radio had already been confiscated. His badge remained clipped to his chest, but it no longer felt like protection. It felt heavy now, almost temporary. Reeves watched Naomi from across the barricade, trying to reconcile the woman he had stopped earlier with the commander standing calmly inside a military perimeter. Nothing about her behavior matched the assumptions he had made the moment he saw her on that motorcycle. And that realization kept replaying inside his head louder than the helicopters overhead. The younger patrol officer finally spoke after nearly 20 minutes of silence. "Daniel, did you notice she never once raised her voice?" Reeves looked at him, but said nothing. Even after everything. Reeves swallowed hard. Because the younger officer was right. Naomi never argued, never threatened anyone, never acted unstable or aggressive. She had simply existed in a place Reeves unconsciously believed she did not belong. A federal analyst suddenly exited the mobile command vehicle carrying a folder marked classified. "Colonel Hayes," the analyst called. "We traced the rerouted advisory." Hayes turned immediately. "Where?" "Inside Atlanta Metro Communications." The analyst lowered his voice. "Whoever intercepted the federal corridor notice specifically redirected patrol presence toward Commander Carter's route." Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. "They wanted local police interaction." Hayes nodded once. And they counted on it escalating. Reeves felt his pulse jump after hearing those words. Counted on it escalating. He slowly looked around at the chaos surrounding Highway 9. The cameras, the live streams, the headlines already forming online. Someone had predicted exactly how this night would unfold. And suddenly Reeves realized he had not simply made a mistake. He had become part of somebody else's plan without even knowing it. A nearby television mounted inside a news van played muted footage from earlier in the stop. Reeves saw himself grabbing Naomi's wrist beside the Harley, while social media comments flooded beneath the video in real time. Some viewers defended him automatically. Others condemned him instantly. But nearly every comment focused on one thing: the assumption that Naomi looked suspicious before she ever did anything wrong. Reeves turned away from the screen, unable to keep watching himself through other people's eyes. Naomi slowly approached the barricade again, stopping only a few feet from him. The flashing lights reflected softly across her face while the distant storm clouds finally began breaking apart over the city skyline. "Do you know what hurts the most?" she asked quietly. Reeves looked up at her carefully. People always think moments like this start with hatred. Her voice remained calm and steady. Most of the time they start with assumptions. Small ones. Quiet ones. The kind people never admit out loud. Reeves stared at the wet pavement beneath him. Naomi continued softly. "You saw my skin before. You saw my humanity." The words settled over the highway heavier than the rain ever had. For several seconds Reeves could not even look at her. Because somewhere deep inside himself, beneath years of routine stops and instincts and unchecked confidence, he knew she was telling the truth. Not the truth he wanted. The truth he had spent years avoiding. And standing there surrounded by federal agents, military vehicles, and millions of strangers watching online, Daniel Reeves realized the real investigation had stopped being about classified intelligence a long time ago. Now it was about him. The sky above Atlanta had begun clearing by the time the first rays of early morning light reflected across the rows of stalled vehicles on Highway 9. The storm was fading, but the tension remained locked over the scene like smoke after a fire. News helicopters still hovered above the city while reporters gathered behind police barricades trying to piece together what had happened during the night. Millions of people had already watched fragments of the confrontation online. A black woman on a motorcycle. A police stop. Military Humvees. Federal agents. Nobody fully understood the story yet, but the country was paying attention now. Naomi Carter stood beside the black SUV watching federal teams prepare to reopen portions of the highway. The classified container had already been transferred into an armored transport vehicle under heavy supervision. Colonel Marcus Hayes remained nearby, speaking quietly into a secure phone line while additional investigators arrived from Washington. Officer Daniel Reeves sat silently on the rear bumper of his patrol cruiser under the watch of internal affairs. His shoulders looked smaller now. The arrogance that once filled his posture had vanished completely sometime before dawn. The younger officer beside him had stopped speaking altogether. Across social media, new footage continued spreading every minute. Different camera angles, different live streams. But one clip kept circulating faster than all the others. The moment Reeves questioned whether Naomi's motorcycle belonged to her. The moment people recognized the assumption behind his words. Several officers farther down the highway quietly avoided looking at Reeves now. Nobody wanted cameras capturing them standing too close to him. A federal investigator approached Colonel Hayes carrying another report. "Sir, Metro Communications confirmed unauthorized access to federal routing channels." Hayes nodded grimly. "Names. Still developing." Naomi looked toward the investigator. "So somebody intentionally redirected police units toward my route knowing local patrol would react." "Yes," the investigator answered carefully. "And based on the online response, they likely expected public escalation to discredit the operation before delivery." Reeves overheard every word. His chest tightened again. He had spent years believing experience gave him good instincts, that he could identify suspicious behavior quickly. But standing there now, hearing how easily someone manipulated those instincts against him, Reeves realized something painful. Bias did not just hurt innocent people. It made him predictable, easy to use. Naomi slowly walked toward the edge of the highway where drivers still waited behind barricades. Several people lowered their phones as she passed. Others stared quietly, no longer seeing just another biker in black leather. Now they saw the woman who had remained calm while an entire system collapsed around her. A little boy sitting in the back seat of an SUV near the barricade rolled down his window slightly and looked at Naomi carefully. "Are you a soldier?" he asked softly. Naomi paused for a second before smiling faintly. "Something like that." The boy nodded with wide eyes before his mother gently pulled him back from the window. Reeves watched the interaction silently. And for the first time all night, shame hit him harder than fear ever had. Because that little boy saw Naomi's humanity immediately. Yet Reeves, with all his training and authority, had failed to do the same. Colonel Hayes finally approached Reeves directly while internal affairs investigators stood nearby. "Your body camera footage has been secured," Hayes said evenly. Reeves nodded slowly. "Am I under arrest?" Hayes studied him for several seconds before answering. "That depends on what the wider investigation uncovers." Reeves lowered his eyes. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Hayes's expression remained unreadable. "Intent does not erase impact, Officer Reeves." The words lingered heavily between them. Around the highway, crews slowly began removing barricades while morning sunlight broke through the clouds over Atlanta for the first time in hours. Naomi walked back toward her Harley-Davidson and placed her helmet carefully under one arm. Before climbing onto the motorcycle, she looked one final time at the endless line of flashing lights stretching behind her across Highway 9. Then her eyes shifted toward Reeves. "People think racism always looks loud," she said quietly. "Sometimes it looks like suspicion. Sometimes it looks like assumptions. Sometimes it looks like someone deciding you do not belong before you even speak." Reeves could not look away from her now, because after everything that had happened that night, he finally understood the truth she had been carrying all along. The most dangerous thing Naomi Carter transported across Atlanta was never inside that locked container. It was the truth exposing everyone who underestimated her the moment they saw the color of her skin. Morning traffic slowly began moving again across Atlanta, but Highway 9 still carried the feeling of something historic having happened there only hours earlier. The storm clouds had finally broken apart, leaving pale sunlight reflecting across wet pavement scattered with tire tracks from military vehicles and police cruisers. Reporters continued broadcasting live from behind barricades, while cleanup crews dismantled temporary checkpoints one by one. Yet despite the reopening roads and fading sirens, nobody seemed ready to let the story go. Across the country, news channels replayed the footage over and over again. The black woman biker standing calmly in the rain. The police stop. The convoy of Humvees arriving through the darkness. The stunned expression on Officer Daniel Reeves's face as federal agents surrounded the scene. Online debates erupted everywhere. Some people defended Reeves automatically. Others pointed directly at the assumptions behind his actions. But one thing almost everyone agreed on was simple. Naomi Carter had changed the entire conversation without shouting once. Reeves sat inside an internal affairs vehicle parked near the shoulder while investigators reviewed body camera footage frame by frame. He could occasionally hear fragments of their conversations through the partially opened window. No visible threat. No probable cause escalation. Initial assumptions influenced engagement. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. Reeves stared through the windshield toward the distant shape of Naomi's Harley-Davidson still parked near the federal convoy. The bike looked different to him now. Earlier that night, he had seen it as suspicious, aggressive, out of place. Now it simply looked like a motorcycle belonging to someone who had every right to be there. That realization hollowed something inside him. Nearby, Colonel Marcus Hayes stood beside several federal investigators reviewing communications records connected to the rerouted advisory. Naomi approached quietly, holding her helmet beneath one arm. "Did they identify who intercepted the notice?" she asked. Hayes nodded slowly. "Preliminary results point toward an outside contractor working inside Metro Communications." Naomi's expression tightened. "Someone trying to trigger public fallout." "Yes," Hayes answered. They understood exactly how local response patterns would work under pressure. Naomi looked toward the rows of police vehicles lining the highway, meaning they trusted bias to do the rest. Hayes did not respond immediately because he knew she was right. Reeves overheard enough to lower his head again. That sentence echoed through him harder than anything else that morning. They trusted bias to do the rest. The frightening part was how effortlessly it had worked. One assumption, one traffic stop, one moment of unconscious judgment. That was all it took to compromise a federal operation and ignite a national spectacle. A nearby reporter suddenly began reading breaking updates live on air. Atlanta Police Department confirms Officer Daniel Reeves has been placed on administrative leave pending federal investigation. Reeves closed his eyes briefly after hearing his own name broadcast across the highway. Administrative leave. The words sounded clinical, clean, but inside, he understood what they really meant. His career, reputation, and identity had all cracked apart before sunrise. Naomi slowly walked toward the barricade one final time, while civilians nearby continued filming her from a distance. Some looked inspired, others emotional. A few simply looked thoughtful, like they had seen something uncomfortable reflected back at themselves during the night. An older black man standing beside a pickup truck removed his cap respectfully as Naomi passed. She nodded politely in return. No speech, no dramatic gesture, just quiet acknowledgement between two people who understood something many others still struggled to see. Reeves watched her carefully, realizing she never once asked for revenge. She never demanded humiliation in return. All she wanted was to be treated like she belonged in the first place. The simplicity of that truth made everything feel even heavier. Naomi finally stopped beside her motorcycle and looked back toward the endless rows of flashing lights fading beneath the morning sun. People always ask how moments like this happen, she said softly without turning around. But the real question is why they keep happening to the same people over and over again. Nobody answered her. Not the reporters. Not the officers. Not even Reeves. Because deep down, standing there beneath the fading lights of Highway 9, everyone already knew the answer. By late morning, the last of the military barricades had finally begun disappearing from Highway 9. Humvees rolled away in disciplined formation while federal vehicles merged back into Atlanta traffic like shadows fading after a long night. News helicopters slowly drifted toward downtown searching for the next breaking story, but cameras still lingered on the woman standing beside the black Harley-Davidson at the center of it all. Naomi Carter adjusted her gloves carefully while sunlight reflected across the wet chrome of the motorcycle. The storm was gone now. Only silence remained. Around the country, clips from the highway continued flooding television screens and social media feeds. Analysts debated policing. Reporters discussed bias. Former officers gave interviews about training and accountability. But the image people could not stop replaying was simple. A black woman standing calmly in the rain while an entire system revealed itself around her. Officer Daniel Reeves remained seated inside the internal affairs vehicle parked near the shoulder. He had not spoken in nearly 20 minutes. The weight of exhaustion showed across his face now, but beneath it sat something unfamiliar to him. Reflection. Real reflection. Not the defensive kind. Not the kind people perform once cameras appear. Something quieter. More painful. He watched Naomi prepare to leave while investigators continued collecting reports around him. For years, Reeves believed racism only existed in obvious forms. Loud hatred, open insults, deliberate cruelty. He never imagined it could also exist inside small assumptions he barely noticed anymore. The quick judgment during a traffic stop. The suspicion attached to certain faces. The unconscious belief that some people belonged in expensive cars and others did not. That realization followed him like a shadow now. Colonel Marcus Hayes approached Naomi one final time, holding a secured folder beneath his arm. "Washington wants a full briefing by tonight," he said. Naomi nodded once. "Will the operation continue?" Hayes looked toward the distant skyline. "Yes, but differently now." Naomi understood what he meant immediately. The mission itself survived, but public trust had taken another hit. Another viral moment. Another reminder that bias could compromise not only innocent people but entire institutions. Hayes glanced briefly toward Reeves inside the vehicle. "Do you think he understands what happened?" Naomi followed his gaze quietly. "I think he finally understands what has always been happening." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of reopening traffic slowly replaced the chaos from earlier that night. Car horns, engines, tires across wet pavement. Atlanta moving forward again like cities always do after moments they pretend to forget. Naomi placed her helmet on slowly, then paused before lowering the visor. Across the highway, Reeves stepped out of the internal affairs vehicle unexpectedly. One investigator moved to stop him, but Reeves quietly shook his head and walked toward Naomi instead. His movements carried none of the confidence from earlier. No swagger. No authority. Just a man confronting the consequences of himself. He stopped several feet away from her motorcycle. "Commander Carter," he said carefully. Naomi waited silently. Reeves swallowed hard before speaking again. "I cannot change what happened tonight." His voice cracked slightly beneath the morning wind. "But you were right. I judged you before I even knew you." The highway around them grew strangely quiet again. Naomi studied him for several seconds through the sunlight, reflecting off her visor. Then she answered softly, "The problem is not that you judged me, Officer Reeves." Reeves looked at her. "It is that too many people like me spend their whole lives being judged first and seen second." The words settled into the air heavier than sirens ever could. Reeves lowered his eyes because there was nothing left to argue with, nothing left to defend. Naomi finally started the Harley-Davidson, the deep engine rumbling across the highway one last time. Federal agents stepped aside as she slowly pulled onto the reopened road beneath the bright Atlanta sky.